Now, here's your host, Dylan Bloyd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast. Today, I'm joined by Stefan Whitwell, founder, CEO, and Chief Investment Officer of Whitwell Co, a nationwide wealth management and family office firm serving founders, business owners, executives, and families. Stefan's career has taken him from Wall Street and institutions like Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse to working across New York, London, Hong Kong, and Tokyo, giving him a unique preparation on wealth creation, investing, and entrepreneurship. His journey also includes experiencing the global financial crisis firsthand after building significant wealth through real estate investing, an experience that would ultimately shape his approach to risk, wealth management, and helping business owners navigate major financial decisions. Today, Whitwell Co. Stefan works closely with founders and families on investment management, tax planning, exit strategies, private markets, and legacy planning. In this conversation, we'll discuss his journey, lessons learned from the financial crisis, what business owners should be thinking about before an exit, and where he sees opportunities and risks in today's market. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you as well. And, me and you have had an opportunity to connect and speak, beforehand. So one of the things you did want to make clear to the listeners, we want to make sure that everyone understands that this is for educational purposes. So any advice given, if you guys are looking for that, please make sure you guys are scheduling that one-on-one with Stefan. And I just want to make sure we're being compliant in those instances. Well, Stefan, like I said, we got to speak and I got to learn a little bit about you, and, we spoke for a while, but I'd like to start in the beginning because, I think it provides some important context for the journey, that you've been on. So you grew up with two teacher parents, right, who worked hard, pursued side hustles. How did that upbringing shape your views on money, work, and success?
Well, there wasn't a lot of money around. The two teacher budget, in Los Angeles, doesn't leave much left over. So there was a lot of times where I wanted things I couldn't afford. Fortunately, I had parents who were entrepreneurial. My dad started a publishing company. He would publish in-house and self-publish before the days of Amazon and other competitors that now make it a lot easier. And I would see him, hustling and building up that business as a means to make ends meet. And, of course, like, hey, you want that, then you got to earn it. And so there was always an encouragement early on to go get a job. And as young as I can remember, I was doing something. I remember one of my first jobs was passing out flyers for a real estate agent in the neighborhood and, putting up flyers on all the cars and parking lots and things like that, whatever kind of a job I could get. And, I will say that I don't think I fully appreciated the benefit of having a dad who was an entrepreneur, because I think it imprinted in my brain that that's something anybody can do,
Yeah.
And of course it's hard, and my parents struggled financially like just most of their lives, to be honest. But it still, as a kid, it just, it was just growing up like, hey, that's something you can do. And it wasn't like, it didn't have like that mystery or like, it wasn't like this foreign thing I had to learn about. It was just like, just kind of grew up with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that you're a product of your, upbringing with your parents, and kind of everything that they instill in you. So when you see that on a day-to-day basis, it's just pretty normal, right? And so, you have
Yeah.
other people who just get a job, work it, for 30, 40 years, and then retire, but you also had yes, they were teachers, but they were also entrepreneurs, like you said, right? So you kind of got the best of both worlds, which is amazing. And I think you're right. You don't understand it until later on in life because you're like, man, now I see why they were doing what they were doing, and so it makes a whole lot of sense of why you have the hustle and the hard work instilled in yourself.
And it's funny too, since they were both teachers, being a rebellious teenager when it came time to deciding what to do for college, in the, as a kid, you're sometimes uniquely able to simplify things, right? So I figured,
Mhm.
all right, I suck my parents, they're academics. That's what they are. Notwithstanding
Yeah.
the fact that my dad built a business that helped us survive, right? But
Right.
fundamentally, he was an academic, and I'm like, well, what's the opposite of that? Because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to be a businessman, and I didn't necessarily
Yeah.
know what that meant, other than I think
Yeah.
in my head it meant making a little more money. And literally I looked at a map and I'm like, okay, I grew up in LA. My parents are on the left. What's on the right? And they're like, oh, it's just business school, the Wharton School. I heard it's an okay business school. Yeah, I think I'll check it out. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was literally that simplistic and kind of embarrassing to admit, but
Yeah.
they might have helped me in that regards too.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. No, it's great, great to hear. And, but you also had a chance to work in New York, London, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. So after the fact, right? So what did those experiences teach you about business, wealth, and human nature that, still influence you today? Because a lot of people who will stay in the United States or stay in one location, the opportunity to kind of open your mind and, study abroad or work abroad, really changes things, right?
I grew up in the Valley, in the San Fernando Valley, and for most of my life until I left high school, unless I drove to downtown LA, tallest building I saw was simply a house that had, a second floor.
Yeah.
So first time I got to New York or even Philadelphia, it was just like, wow, eye-opening. Actually, kind of funny story. I didn't, again, budgets were tight. I didn't have the opportunity to fly to Penn to check it out before going. I just did all the research I could. Sounded like an amazing school. I'm like, if I can get in, I'll go. So we went, and I went, and we're on the bus driving to Penn. And the drive from the airport to Penn, you go by some pretty rough neighborhoods.
Right.
Okay. And I'd never seen Penn. And I'm looking at these neighborhoods. I'm like, man, I don't know if I made the right decision.
Yeah.
And then you get to campus and it's like every kid there had like the purple and blue diagonal, like preppy tie. And they had like, tan pants on, a dark blue, dress coat and penny loafers at the time. And I didn't even own
Yeah.
a pair of penny loafers. I don't think I had that outfit. I was wearing flip-flops and OP shorts.
Yeah.
I stuck out like a sore thumb.
Surfer.
Uh, and for me, it was funny, it was also a little bit of language, kind of culture shock, right? I thought down was a direction, or a sign of approval. Like I'm down with that, or,
Yes.
literally down, but down is like, you need down in your life to get through the winter. You need a
Yeah.
down jacket.
Right.
And I had to learn how to walk. So when you're walking on ice, if you have like that nonchalant, I'm cool kind of high school strut, you're going to end up on your butt.
Right.
And so I had to learn how to walk, so there's all these funny things that I had to learn. The favorite story though was my first day at Penn. I'm in a food court and, just looking to get a slice of pizza. It looked good and cheap. And, so I'm in line. And I get to the front of the line, this like scruff Italian guy with like gold chains and hair, like really, really a lot of oil slicked back and really tan skin. He's like, what do you want? And he like yells at me, what do you want? Like almost like you're in trouble or something, I'm like, well, I want a slice, 2 slices of, pepperoni pizza. And he turns around and he yells at like his assistant. He goes, 2 pepperoni pies. So this is where it gets bad. Okay. I then be like, hey, I didn't want a pie. I wanted a pizza. And in Philly, a pie is pizza.
Yeah.
And he looked at me. He's like, are you messing with me? Like he literally thought I was messing with him.
Yes.
And it was like this standoff, like 2 guys looking at each other. I'm like, what do you not understand? I want pizza, not a pie. And he's looking at me like, what are you on? You making fun of me? He's like angry, right?
Yeah.
He was angry to begin with, but now he was really confused. Like, could there be somebody that dumb or messing with him? He didn't consider that I was genuinely clueless. So the person behind me, thank God, rescued me. And they like figured out what was going on. And they like tapped my shoulder and like, hey, psst, pie is pizza. And I'm like, oh shit. And I felt like 1 inch tall, so
Yeah.
that was my first day at Penn. But I'll tell you this at Penn, one of the interesting things for me was, I think I was at least in my high school, 90% of the people didn't want to. And there was certainly a group of kids that I was close with that were very smart and inspiring in their own way. But most people there were, over half the schools bust in and had on an hour from downtown LA, didn't want to be there. And a bunch of people locally didn't want to be there. And so I was suddenly in an environment where look, truth be told, half the kids were there because mommy and daddy donated to a wing of this or a wing of that and wrote a big check. But the other half were there because, like me, they were just hustling, trying to make it, and they were hardworking. And I would say to this day, I mean, credit a lot of my success to just being inspired by my peers. I mean, I was really blown away by how amazing they were and by some of their study habits and different things that forced me to raise my game. And that was unexpected. And when you live in New York, I'll say this, LA, I love the weather, but it's my first time being exposed to that kind of drive. There's just a level of drive. And I have to say that it was intoxicating. It was amazing. And there's people from all over the world, and just the scale and scope of New York and Tokyo too. But my international experience was, for me, the lesson there was humanity. Getting to know people from different countries. Yeah, there's all kind of things that we're different on, but I feel like I discovered, which may be kind of obvious to you or to a lot of other people, but to me it was kind of something that really stood out, which is just discovering that there's certain basic things that make us human, that we all can relate to one another in some way, shape, or form. And that felt comforting, that like, hey, we're all in this together, even if sometimes we look different, we speak different, we do things differently. And I really enjoyed that. And, I think you learn a lot, maybe some lessons that your parents would have liked you to have learned at home when you're finally living on your own. And I think I also discovered some things about America that I found new appreciation for. You always find new cool things somewhere else. You're like, wow, that's amazing. But I found some things about my home country that I now found even more amazing, that I maybe didn't appreciate before traveling to other countries that didn't have some of those things. So, I strongly encourage people to travel, as they can. I mean, it's amazing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. My mom also grew up in the Southern California, LA area, Reseda. So, San Fernando Valley, she really enjoyed it. But at the same time, she said the same thing. She actually went to 13 different schools in 9 years, all in that area.
Nice.
Yeah, all over the
Really?
place. And so,
Wow.
so meeting friends, and being able to communicate with people came easy to her. It's like she knew that when she made friends, they probably were only going to last a year or two, right? And so, but she said the same thing. Nobody wanted to be at school. Everyone wanted to be on the beach. Everyone wanted to go and be doing their own thing. But once she moved out of there, she realized there was some things that she appreciated, but then also kind of got a broader scope of what the real world's all about, right? And so that's pretty amazing that you got to kind of experience it, the culture shock within the United States, and then it probably almost made it a little bit easier when you went to another country, right?
Much.
Yeah.
Much.
Yeah. No, that's that is great. And so, you've also spoken openly about experiencing a global financial crisis, right? From, the wrong side of the table. Before the crisis, you had built significant wealth through real estate investing, like we talked about. What happened and how quickly did things change when that market turned?
Quickly.
Yeah.
I went, the punchline is I went from being worth $35 million to being worth zero in the span of, 12 to 18 months. And it was, I hit rock bottom. It was brutal. It was emotionally tough. It was logistically tough. Emotionally tough, I would say, so what happened is, I had always been raised being told, look, if you're doing business with banks, if you ever get into trouble, you got to communicate with them. Don't just, last minute, don't avoid it, be proactive, communicate. Well, I did that. In fact, I couldn't even get my bank to return my call. I had to corner the regional president and say, hey, my banker's not calling me back and we got a problem. It's 9 months out, but clock's ticking. We gotta solve this now. And then they convened a meeting when I finally cornered this guy, and I knew they were in trouble if it was that hard to meet him, right? And
Yeah.
I was me sitting across by myself, sitting across the table from, two bankers and two lawyers. And mind you, I had a perfect track record. perfect track record, borrowed millions, paid millions back, never been late, perfect credit, always on time. And they wouldn't work with me. They basically said, look, if you can prove that you don't need this loan, then we'll be happy to renew it. I'm like, guys, what is that? Are you kidding me? If I didn't need your help, I wouldn't be begging for a meeting with you guys. Like, come on,
Right. Yeah.
a bunch of suits in a poorly lit room with bad ventilation on a day where I've got 10 other things to do. Like, this is not how I want to be spending my time.
Exactly.
And what happened was I had a year before that, and they came to me and they said, hey, look, on this one building, which by the way was at the corner of Main and Main in downtown Austin, office building at 8th and Congress, historic office building. I mean, couldn't be a better location. It was rented, cash flowing. And the first lien was, as I recall, it was like $4 million lien. And we had a $10 million appraisal. So not super leveraged, right? I mean, not crazy at all. And they go, hey, look, the original length of loan that we gave you is too long relative to your leases from the perspective of our auditors, and they're giving us a lot of grief. Would you do us a favor? Would you please voluntarily shorten the term of your loan? And then when it comes up for renewal, we'll be more than happy to just renew it, like rubber stamp, don't worry about it. Like, it's clearly not going to be an issue. Well, I think they did that in good faith, but I was an idiot for agreeing to do that, because what happened is, fast forward, they're suddenly in a bid to survive, right? Their books are upside down and they're in survival. And literally, I think that the loan officer that I've been working with got called into his boss's office, and he just had a baby, right? And worried about keeping his job. And boss goes, hey, you want to keep your job? He's like, of course I do. Well, do you want to know what you need to do to keep it? Yes. Well, you need to shrink your loan book. Shrink my loan book. Like, until that point, every time in order to get a bonus, you got to grow your loan book. Shrink it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, shrink it. How am I going to do that? Like, I don't know. That's your problem, but friendly suggestion, don't renew any loans. So there, so I got stuck on the backside of there trying to survive, which, by the way, we bailed out the bank. So it was very frustrating for me. And then I had, so once I had one loan went into default, all my other loans had cross default provisions. And next thing I was upside down, and I was kind of involuntarily enrolled in a PhD program on, distressed loans and distressed investing. And it was brutal. I mean, I'd sit in court going through these proceedings because I filed bankruptcy to try to slow the process. And fast forward, I was able to return all the bank's capital. I didn't get any gimmies. I didn't get any gifts. I didn't get any bailout. I repaid every loan dollar for dollar, every penny of interest. But I lost everything in the process. It was brutal. And I had to call my investors every month with no good news, which was the worst call. There's nothing more difficult than picking up the phone, calling somebody for like that 12th month in a row where you have nothing but bad news. It's horrible. Right. And the upshot, though, is that if you communicate with people and you're honest with them and you don't hide, and you can come out the other side. And I eventually did. But, at the personal level, it was tough because, I mean, I remember the hardest moment I ever faced. Well, I've 4 kids, and my daughter looked at me with her sweet big eyes and said, Daddy, I forget what it was she wanted to do one summer. A totally reasonable activity, like any other time would have been fine.
Yeah.
And I had to tell her no, because I was worried about, like, how are we going to make it?
Yes.
And that was searing. It was just painful. And one of the things that was hard for me as a dad was trying to figure out, how do I communicate with my kids about this? Because, kids are smart, right? And when parents try to hide stuff from their kids, how well does that work?
Not well at all.
We know,
well
right? We know,
yes,
we know.
exactly.
They think we don't, but we know, right? Like,
yes.
So knowing that, I'm like, okay, I can't lie. I don't want to be disingenuous, but my kids are really young. How are they going to understand what Dad's going through? And it took me months, Dylan, but I finally, what really kind of hit me one day is, I know how I'm going to explain it. Because I was teaching my kids how to ride a bike. And, so like there's 100% chance when you're teaching your kid how to ride a bike that they're going to fall down, right? And the lesson is dust yourself off and take a deep breath and have a cry if you need to, and then get back on, right? And so I said, Daddy fell off his bike at work, right? And I got some bad scrapes and it hurts and it's frustrating. And guess what? What do I need to do? I need to get back on that bike and get pedaling again. And so and through that, I was able to explain to them in a very authentic way, both where I could be optimistic and had the confidence that I will get through this, but still own the pain and the frustration that I was going through, which I couldn't hide from them. I didn't want to hide from them. I wanted my kids to see that we have good days and bad days, and that we work through our bad days. I don't want them to grow up thinking every day is a good day.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it was a Dylan, it was a really painful experience. I doubted myself. I beat myself up. What could I have done differently? How could I have avoided this? It was embarrassing. It was everything, and I had to ultimately, the worst was I had to declare bankruptcy to get out of certain kind of contingent liabilities and things that were still hanging over me, to clear so that I could start a new company and begin to build and provide again. And in that rubble, I went to get advice from a mentor, because I was struggling. I'm like, okay, I know I'm not a W-2 employee. I don't have any money left. So how do I create a business? I don't have a balance sheet anymore. What do I do?
Right.
And so it was a story of reinvention. I had to reinvent myself. And in some sense, I think that's something that a lot of people, by the way, speaking of 2026, a lot of people today are going to have to go through with some of the consequences of AI, where jobs are going to change. Maybe new jobs are going to be created, but you're going to have to change with that. And it's not always easy. So I'm sitting with this mentor and I'm like, look, what do I do? How do I make lemonade out of these lemons?
Yeah.
And he asked me the most crazy question that made no sense to me at all at the time, which changed my life. He goes, hey, have you ever thought about being a wealth advisor? I'm like, what? Didn't you just hear the part where I just said I just got done with bankruptcy and had to go through all this? Like, where do you think anybody would want to be my client?
Yeah.
And that would be a great way to, what? But then he said, so I was like, I don't understand that at all. And then he said, well, two things. Number one, you told me that you don't like dealing with middlemen. You like sitting face to face with the decision makers, and that's a business where you do. You sit right across the seat to the people that you're working with, and you have that direct accountability and intimacy with your clients. You're not like in Wall Street where you got 15 middlemen. And that's true, and I get that. But the second part was, it tied it all together. Go, Stefan, I'd rather have a guy like you being my advisor and being on my team and watching my back, a guy with your fancy degrees who has had failure too, who has had to walk through fire, who has had to go struggle with some really difficult life chapters, and who has come out the other side wiser because of it, than a guy with all your same fancy degrees who thinks he's always right and the smartest guy in the room always. I thought about that. I go, yeah, I wouldn't want that other guy either.
Yeah.
And it was the light that turned on. I thought, you know what, from that that's the perspective I needed. And it was just a shift. I'm still the same guy. I had still all the same positive experiences and scar tissue from what I had gone through. But I just needed that one human being to help me see things totally different light. And when I saw it in that different light, I was like, that's it. So fast forward to today, run a nationwide wealth management firm, and every wealth management firm in the industry, well, if you look on their website, we'll talk about risk management, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's personal. It's not just a theoretical, hey, make sure you put that on the marketing materials. It looks good. It's like, no, I've lived through that. I do not want my client. I remember the pain of that chapter. I do not want my clients to have to go through that. And so part of the inspiration is, hey, how can I use my lessons that I learned from that? Because there's always a lot you can learn from it. I mean, in a positive sense, one of the things that I learned from it in a really positive way was the tremendous amount of money you can make in those dislocated environments where you're buying assets for pennies on the dollar that I didn't even know existed until I sat through those kind of things on the wrong side of the table, admittedly, for 2 years. But I was taking notes. I was learning. I was watching it like a hawk. And I'm like, next time I'm going to be on the side of that table, helping my clients, helping myself. And indeed, that's what we do today. And so, I can look back and laugh about it. I can look back with a sense
Yeah.
of gratitude, but Dylan, it was rough. And
Yeah.
for anybody watching who's going through a tough time or who has had a tough time, um, you know, hang in there and know that a lot of other people, like virtually every successful person I know, has, if they open up, will have gone through experiences of failure or things that didn't work um, that I wish more people would talk about, because I
Hmm.
think it gives you more hope when you're going through those periods. Like, hey, okay, this is just a bad chapter. Let's get busy writing the next one,
Yes.
and not get too bogged down by that. So yeah, quite a crazy start to this chapter, but
Yeah.
it's been built back and things are going really well. And in some weird ways, I do look back on that with gratitude. I'll tell you one last thing on that. I feel that today I am a more understanding, more empathetic person than I would have been had I not gone through that. Because I watched a lot of good Americans get screwed over by banks and go through
Hmm.
rough situations that weren't of their doing. And a lot of them didn't have the kind of doggedness to rebuild. They
Yeah.
really got hurt. And that hurt lasted a long time.
Hmm.
And it it was humbling. And I think I think I am a better man for having gone through that, because now when I see other people struggling or hurting, I can relate and and be supportive in the way that I want to be, in a heartfelt way, that in a way that I may not have been if I was just always successful.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think what I love the most about that, Stefan, is because you really could have went the other way. You hear about all these stories who people were affected by the financial crisis, and of course every story is unique, but how they react to it and how they respond to those, you could have easily went the other way. And the fact that you were open and transparent a little bit with your kids at that age, they're younger, of course, but you gave them an understanding that they can use, later on in life, and they'll have a much more higher appreciation for it later on in life, of course, like we were talking about. But at the same time, it's amazing. And then at the same time, you probably feel like you could, after you go through something like that, you're like, okay, I know the storm's going to, going to pass at some point. I can basically get through anything, as long as I stay, positive and make sure I have the right people in my corner. Of course, you have the one guy who told you, basically gave you not just necessarily the reinforcement, but gave you, a little bit of a blueprint of what you should be doing because of the experiences you had. Those mentors are super important, and obviously you are here today because of that, right? And but at the same time, I think we could even point it back to your parents, right? Of them kind of showing you hard work and determination and instilling that into you. So it's amazing. It's an incredible story.
Thank you. It was a you know uh, some challenging days, but like I said, whenever I talk to good friends or clients or family, everybody's got challenging days.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody has them. So I think we need to make sure that in fact, I think one of the things I realized too going through that is a lot of people, and maybe even me for a little bit, put up walls pretending like everything's fine.
Yes.
Um, when in fact you might be going through a really, really, really rough chapter. So, one of the things I would always encourage people to do is when you ask people how they're doing, well, first of all, make sure you ask people how they're doing. People
Yeah.
around you,
Right.
people that you might assume are doing well. Don't assume. There might be some aspect in their life that they're struggling with. Maybe business, maybe not business. Who knows what it is? And then two, when you ask about it, make sure you really ask in a way that gives them the space to open up. And that, that's hard today because people are often so distracted or, running from one thing to another on their phones. But if you can just give people a little bit of attention and really that space to share with you what they're struggling with, that it could make all the difference in the world for them just to have been heard.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And then, to your point, piggybacking off that a little bit, be intentional, but at the same time, care about what they're saying, right? Because at the same time, you could ask them, "Oh, how are you doing? How's everything? How's life?" Because it's a common question that comes up, right? How's the family? How's life? And then you just kind of change the subject right away. Let's talk business, but truly care about what they're saying because you never know. Like you said, you never know what people are going through. They could have a poker face and act like everything's good, and because at the same time, if you're doing really well, they don't want to open up to you, But being vulnerable, if that's going to help you get to where you need to get to and help you get through those hard times, it's very important to do so.
We're human. We have hearts. We're
Yeah.
not just, I think that's what makes us different than AI. We still have
Yes.
feelings. We're human beings. And I think we got to learn to, um, we have to live heart-led lives. In fact, I was doing a lot of inner work at that time just to try to get through it and deal with some of the things I was feeling and struggling with. And, the conclusion for me coming out of that is I had put up some walls to try to protect myself emotionally, but that kept me distant from people in a way. I want to be connected with people. I enjoy being connected. And so I realized I needed to do that. And so I challenged myself. I said, I am going forward, going to live a heart-led life in my personal life and in work. And the one that really scared me was and in work, because I had no idea what the heck that meant. Even saying it sounded weird to me. It sounded like, ooh, what the heck does that mean? I don't know what that means, but I knew that I needed to do that. I needed to be heart-led in my life period, in the morning, in the evening, at work, at home, and just try to be real. And
Hmm.
it has opened up doors in my life that are indescribable. Um, and taken me a while to figure it out. So it wasn't like some epiphany and something, but just, I just kept at it. And I'm like, I don't know what this means, but I'm gonna keep working at it.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. You're absolutely right. And I do appreciate you sharing that story, and that's really great advice for the listeners. And, so like you said, today, you described Whitwell and Co. as providing family office services for founders and families. So what does that actually mean? And who are your ideal clients?
So people that have made money, um, realize that very quickly that money is great for what money does, but money also comes with certain complications. Um, when you don't have money, you're like, man, I wish I had money so I could invest in this and this and this and that, or do this, right? But when you
Right.
have a bunch of money, suddenly you end up with a whole new set of problems. And at the heart of some of those problems is getting your stuff organized and organizing between all the different moving parts that now exist. And coordinating amongst all the different advisors. You've got legal advisors, you've got, tax team, you've got investment, an investment advisor, you've got a bunch of people that you made private equity investments in, you have estate planning to think about, you have your kids to think about, you have your company to think about, and they've got different, it's just this coordination. And the thing that money is worth more than money is your time. And once you have money, you realize you begin to think, most people begin to ask themselves questions like, what's most important to me? What do I really want to be focusing on? And usually people that can come up with heart-led answers to where they want to be focusing their energy, what their mission is, where they want to be making a difference. They, at a practical level, they realize, man, I don't want to deal with a lot of these details. I need somebody to help me organize that. And the problem is that, you can hire some really great people in all these different areas, but things get lost in the cracks
Mhm.
between those different areas. So you need you need a team that will connect, collaborate, organize, and bring it all together, and and do it in plain English, and do it from kind of client-centric perspective where you're taking the time to put the client's vision for their life first. 'Cause that's really what this is all about, right? It's not just about trying to, grow the numbers. It's like, you know, what do you want your life to look like? What would a great life look like? And then it's going, okay, what do we need to do to organize your life? And how much money do we need to allocate to this or that to support and create that life? But the goal is to live that great life. The goal is not more money.
Right.
Even though that may be part of the process. The goal is the human being and their vision, their definition of life. And that's what makes my job fun, because everybody's vision of what a great life is different. I would be bored out of my mind. I mean, I'm a finance geek at heart, and I love investing and all that stuff and tax strategy. But once you've mastered that, if you're doing the same transaction type stuff every day, it gets boring. And so for me, the fun comes from the fact that everybody's vision for their life is different. And one of the really fun, kind of cool things about my job from my perspective is we get to have some really neat conversations with people, really open, intimate conversations with people, where we ask them deeper questions. Because our definition of wealth is living at the intersection of health, wealth, and purpose. The dude that's healthy and has a bunch of money but has no clue what he's meant to be doing, and he just buying hot cars and doing all this cool stuff, Truth is that guy's empty inside. He's trying to find meaning, and he's not going to find it in a red hot Ferrari. Nothing against the red hot Ferrari. Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Go play with one. But that's not going to give you lasting fulfillment inside. And likewise, you could have great fulfillment inside, but if you're not doing anything for your health, what does all that do for you? What does all that money do for you if you're sick and constantly dealing with, So we'll often, for example, ask clients, hey, Dylan, what are you doing? What have you done the last quarter since we last met to invest in your health? And if you get a Beavis and Butthead type quality answer, that client could probably do a little better. And we don't fashion ourselves health experts, but we'll say, well, Dylan, you probably know what you need to be doing a little bit better of. So we're going to hold your feet to the fire. You pick a few things that you're going to do better, and I want a better answer when we talk next quarter. And they just sometimes need that encouragement, that coaching, that holding them accountable. And we can have kind of safe accountability conversations because we're not their husband, we're not their wife, we're not on their board, we're not their co-owner. We're safe. We're behind the curtain. They can fire us. It's safe. And it's totally confidential, no strings attached. And so there's some really neat conversations we can have, especially around purpose. Because once you have made money, it's helpful to know what your purpose is, because then that gives you direction around how you can better use your money to create a life of meaning. And again, that's different for everybody. So it's that I really enjoy that. And one size doesn't fit all, right? I mean, that's true whether you're talking about, extremely sophisticated, multi-million dollar, estates. It's true whether you're talking about underwear. I mean, one size does not fit all.
Yes. You're right. Yeah. So it's kind of like a puzzle, right? That you guys are helping them put together, and so
100%.
it's not necessarily that you guys are telling them exactly how to live their lives. You're just giving advice and telling them that, hey, we want to help you not only prolong your, financials, we want to prolong your life, and have a fulfilled life. And so it's amazing that you guys are doing that. So let's say someone comes into an eventual exit or liquidity event, something that they have an idea of, not something like, winning the lottery. What should business owners or anyone who comes into those events be doing years before they even plan to sell?
So yeah, man, especially for business owners, there's a lot that happens. There's a lot. There's financial planning opportunities and tax planning opportunities. There's also very important emotional preparation that has to happen. And it's also going to be individually tailored to that owner. There's some owners that they're like, hey, you hit my number, I'm happy to be out of here. I'll cut I'll cut that umbilical cord. I'm out. I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
There's other people that are like, whoa, yes, we need to sell, but cutting the umbilical cord, we have to, like, can I stay on for another 10 years?
Exactly. Yes.
And so understanding that that owners, who they are emotionally in terms of how long they're going to be around, what those relationships are like, are really important, because nobody's going to look out for their team like they will. And by team, I mean their employees and ultimately their clients. And and the smarter owners, the smarter sellers, will often find ways and opportunities to structure things in a way that they can then look back and say, you know what, I did right by everybody. But you need some time, a little free space to do that, or an encouragement to do that, even if it's in your heart to do, because things get really rushed and really hectic when you get close to that pre-sale sprint. And the other thing that happens is, like, companies all have consultants, accountants, and lawyers, and all these people representing the company, bankers, transaction bank, everything. But often there's an owner that might be a significant stakeholder, might be the majority stakeholder, but there's often nobody at the table representing him or her and their family. And so one of the ways that we strongly encourage, whether they use our firm or somebody else, say, hey, make sure you have an M&A fluent firm. And, you know, for us, it's a little more natural because I started my career in New York in M&A, but have an M&A comfortable firm that can sit at that table with you early, because there may be, and often are, little structural things you can change that if it's early in the negotiation, the other side's happy to work with you on, that could make a big difference for you in, you know, in one way or another, even if it's not affecting the price. Could be tax, could be other feel-good issues, could be optics, could be a number, could be related to your estate plan, could be a number of different things. And if it's early in the process, the other side is usually very willing to work with you. But if you come to the game late, once that purchase agreement is virtually negotiated, nobody is going to want to change anything, because at that point, once you get closer and closer to the finish line, everybody just, all they want becomes like a maniacal focus on just printing the ticket, get the deal done, you know, get paid, get it done. And it's really hard to make last minute adjustments. So important to make sure you're not missing big opportunities, because those things, once you sign that agreement, on the other side of the transaction, it's too late. And another kind of more subtle thing that can also be really valuable for owners is to come into that process with a plan, a definitive sense of what do you need to support all of your family goals, right? So you're selling a business for, you know, let's call it, you know, the number on the table is 50. Maybe the guy wants 60. Maybe the buyers, you know, put an initial number out there of, you know, 40. And he has a financial plan. He knows he just needs 30.
Yeah.
To meet all of his needs. Like, and you have math, you've done it, everything. Well, then you can have sport and you can push and do everything you can to try to get a deal done at your ideal number. But push come to shove, you know that you're still winning at any number above 30. And often transactions that should happen for people, that sometimes get killed and don't happen at the deal table because there's not an agreement on value, and it might even be a shockingly small difference.
Yeah.
But get the, you know, the heat of the moment and egos and all the different sides, and people can lose perspective. And sometimes it's fear. It's fear of not having enough. Oh, if we don't sell, we're not going to have enough, because they imagine that if they got to pay tax bill, they got this, they got that, they're not going to have enough. And for anybody of any level of wealth, transaction or no transaction, you know, the way to combat that is to understand what do you actually need, and to know that math, because then you know what your you know, revenue needs to be, or your resources need to be to be okay. And I think that, you know, fundamentally, whether you're worth 100 million, a billion, or 10 million, or 100,000, one of the most fundamental questions that everybody shares in common that they want help with answering and improving their answer to is, do we have enough? Are we going to be okay?
Yeah.
Are we going to have enough? And so the more planning and support you have going into that, the better. And then there's also more technical things, like a lot of companies are run to in a way to reduce their tax burden, right? So they do
Mhm.
everything they can to reduce their taxes. Well, guess what? That makes your income statement look terrible. So once you start going to sell it, there's some like technical things like that. You're like, okay, look, Mr. Owner, that's worked to maximize cash in the pocket and to minimize your tax bill, but that's not going to work to maximizing the value of your company. We need to show a really healthy margin. You're going to need to start paying more taxes for a couple of years because you're going to benefit way more on the other side of this transaction if you do that. Things like
Mhm.
that, right? Which
Right.
I think is easier to find people that'll give you that kind of advice. But there's often, the human side to that and their family and other things that don't always get the time and attention that they need. And one final thing I'll throw out there too. It's interesting, but I was talking to an entrepreneur the other day and he said, I got my number. I got what I thought I would want. I got a bunch of money in the bank. I had all the free time and I was depressed
Mm.
because I had no idea what I was doing. I went from being like the CEO running a big company to suddenly I had nothing. I had a bunch of money in the bank and all this free time. I thought I should be happy, but I wasn't. I was depressed. And it took him years to get out of that. And that's not a unique story. So I think the other part of coaching is people through that is saying, let's make sure we're talking about what your next chapter is going to look like so that you can begin to lay the groundwork for that, begin to get excited about that so that when the transaction happens, yes, embrace any feelings that come with the transaction, but but have laid the foundation for your next chapter so that you can then continue moving in your journey as a human being and not suddenly get hit with that depressing void that can often hit people.
Right, yeah. It's right back to what you said is, it's not a one size fits all. Everybody has different paths, everybody has different stories. I just recently spoke with somebody who was definitely a leader in this industry, and he's starting this company, and we talked about what would it look like if you were to, exit, things like that. He's like, "Man, I'm still young, I'm only going to turn 50 and I'm not ready to just basically right now I could probably do whatever I want, but at the same time like I want a purpose." And so this is their purpose. So even if they were to sell, they still want to stay on, right? But then you have the other people on the other end, who want to sell and just be done. So in this process, where do you guys come into play? Are you guys before the fact, or is it more along the lines of after the fact they sell and then they come and talk to you and kind of figure?
Earlier the better because,
Okay.
people are busy, so doing all the
Yes.
kind of things we were just talking about, you can't jam it into 1 week or one rush month. And so to the extent that you can work on it, chip away at it a little bit by little bit, consistently over 3, 4, 5 years, that's really
Yeah.
ideal.
Okay.
Don't always get that liberty. Sometimes people,
Right. Right.
kind of figure that out last minute and do the best you can, but it'll be less stressful if people can start working on that. If you're thinking about selling your business, start working on that 4 or 5 years in advance. And by the way, if you're married, you need to talk to your wife about this too, because I've seen this happen a bunch of times where, and I'm going to generalize, but guy sells the business, bunch of money in the bank, sitting at home, twiddling his thumbs, doesn't have that next thing figured out, right? Wife's excited. He's going to be home more. We're going to travel more. We're going to do all this stuff. So he takes the requisite trip to Europe for a month, comes back. And within a week, it's like, I started a new business. And then the fighting starts. And why do you think the fighting starts? Because she is like, hey, I have ridden the ups and downs of the first 15 years in that business. And now you're saying you want to do that again?
Yeah.
Because she's associating that like new business with all those ups and downs. And he's like, what are you talking about? We got 25 million in the bank. And I'm like, why are you
Hmm.
upset? Why are you yelling at me? Right.
Right.
And there's nothing more important than protecting your family. So it is super important to try to look at wealth a little more holistically and talk about some of these things in advance to protect literally both your wealth, but you know the ones you love that are around
Hmm.
you, so that you can craft that ideal life, whatever that looks like. And if that ideal life is going back to work, then do that. But let's structure it in a way where you have your safety money locked down. So you're in that example, she knows that no matter what happens over here, you're safe. The family's safe. Got all this locked down through, the right legal structure, the right kind of assets, everything.
Hmm.
Then it's easier to embrace something like that. You can create that division and no longer, but everything can be solved for if you talk about it. It's just the stuff you
Yes.
don't talk about that can really get dicey.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so you're exactly on point because you should be aligned with your family and your loved ones, right? But the important point here is you don't have to do it alone. Please make sure you guys are listening to this. Stefan and his company, they have obviously went through a lot of this. So please, again, anyone who's listening, make sure you guys please reach out and do that one-on-one like we were speaking about. So that being said, Stefan, for someone who is listening, who wants to learn more about Whitwell and Co., connect with you or continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to do so?
Just, give us a call, schedule a meeting with me online. You go to our website at whitwelladvisors.com and pick a time that's good for you. I'm always eager to meet new people and learn your story and explore whether there's something to do together, and love to meet new people. So reach out. Happy to help you think through anything that might be hot and pressing on your plate. And Dylan, thanks for today, and look forward to staying in touch and finding more ways to collaborate.
Yes, I do as well. Thank you so much for sharing your story, advice, and I really do look forward to the listeners kind of connecting with you and learning more because again, this is such an amazing thing that you guys are doing, and I really appreciate you joining today and just spending time with me and the listeners.
My pleasure.